Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, today to another episode of the Coach U Show, where we interview authors, speakers, coaches, people that are the top in their field. And today we're with Braden Kelley. I'm so honored to spend time. I've been with Braden probably 15, 20 times, and I've witnessed him in a mastermind group. He's an author of 2 best-selling books, Charting Change and Stoking Your Innovation Bonfire. We're actually going to be at a mastermind in November too, in New York. So I'm super excited to see Braden. And for those of you guys who have wondered, what does it mean to be a thought leader? How do you break out of corporate America and become a speaker, an author, and being able to charge to do workshops and all this? Braden's going to show us how. Braden, so awesome that you're on the Coach U Show. Glad you're here, my friend.
Happy to be here, Dennis. Good to see you. Good to chat with you.
Yeah, man. What's it like in Seattle today?
Man, it is a beautiful, glorious, sunny day. So we are enjoying our last little wisps of summer.
So there's a lot of people that want to be an influencer, but most people can't, right? Most people, they can't get their book out. Most people, they can't charge for speaking and whatnot. What do people need to do if they want to pursue the path that you have and start building these frameworks and tools and speak on the thing that they know?
Well, I think the first thing, like you said, is to pick a focus. It's almost impossible to focus on everything. Myself, as somebody who's interested in a lot of things, that continues to be a challenge for me, to bring myself back and to remain focused. But the first thing is to pick a focus and then write about what you know around that focus. Make sure that you're well informed on the topic area and that you're bringing something new to the topic area. And just start, because you can't really call yourself a thought leader. You can't really call yourself an influencer. You have to start contributing to the community of the topic that you're interested in and contribute really great work and eventually be recognized for that work. So it takes time, it takes investment, and it takes having a unique voice and having something unique to say, to help expand the field, to help expand the topic, to bring that passion to the topic area, and to bring your unique insights to that topic area.
So how did you become the #1 innovation speaker?
Well, I just started. As I mentioned before, I started speaking. You don't necessarily just come out of the gate as a paid speaker all the time. So there were a couple local events, and I started speaking at local events, and I started writing and started to get recognized for my writing. And as I started to build up a body of work, unique thoughts in the area of innovation, then I started to get invited to speak at conferences. Then I started to have the ability to start charging to speak at events. But it's a process, and you have to see it that way, and you have to go into it with the open eyes that it's not necessarily going to happen immediately, and be willing to make that investment to do those first few speeches for free, because not only are you getting a chance to test your material, but you're also getting a chance to develop your style and your skills to get better as a speaker, and to learn what resonates with the audience and what doesn't, and what areas you need to work on to improve as a speaker. And it's an endless journey. You're never a finished product as a speaker. I think there's always things that we can learn from other speakers, and there's always things that we can learn from how the audience reacts to different things and what they show interest in and what they don't show interest in, because it's all about challenging your own assumptions. It's all about relevance, and it's all about resonance. And that those 3 points factor in a number of different areas, and speaking is one of those areas.
Can you tell me about your first paid speaking gig? What was that like?
I think it was a bit stressful, because the imposter syndrome comes to the forefront. Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Are people going to find value in the message that I bring? So those doubts creep up, and the only way to overcome those doubts is to be well prepared, to be well rehearsed. And when I say rehearse, I mean do your material, what that next slide is going to be. I always try to walk through things. Some people will stand up and do dry runs and things of that nature. I tend to run through my slides just over and over again until I know what that second slide is, that third slide, that fourth slide, so I can make better transitions. That first paid speaking gig can be scary, because there is that pressure that you're being paid to do something and you want to deliver, and making sure that you're well prepared and that you have a good story and that there's value in that story are the ways to overcome that fear.
So let's say you get a a booked paid speaking gig, either direct or through a speaking bureau, and it's a few months out, walk us through your process of how you prepare so that you don't make the kind of mistakes that most speakers make.
Yeah, where I always start is having multiple conversations with the client because my speeches are generally not off the shelf. They're generally, I'm trying to deliver as much value as possible for that client. And the way to do that is to make sure that it's tailored to their unique needs. I start with multiple calls to understand the topic within the topic that would make the most sense and most impact for them and help them achieve their goals of bringing in a speaker. We talk about various topics within the topic. So if we're talking about innovation, maybe they want something more on culture, maybe they want something more on process, maybe they want something more on tools. And those are very different speeches, and those are very different approaches that you may take, because you might start out thinking that something's going to be a keynote, and maybe a workshop approach makes more sense, or maybe it's a keynote and a workshop. And then you have to know in your mind how you want to price those things. Do you want to have a bundle price? Do you want to have standalone price for a keynote and a workshop, and keep those and separate? I tend to do more of a bundle if I'm doing multiple things for one client and one bit to give them that extra value. But I start with trying to define what the topic within the topic is going to be, and then I start to ruminate around the story that I think I want to tell. I start to outline, and then I start to fill in the outline. So I create a messy PowerPoint deck. I start putting words on slides that are basically the outline. And then I start looking for images, because I use a lot of images in my speeches. I don't use many words on the slides. I don't kill people with PowerPoint. I don't show up with slides with 12-point font and 1,000 words on a slide or something. One slide, one message. So I figure out what the messages are going to be first, and then I usually focus on trying to find the most impactful image for that message. And that message not only helps to solidify the message in the audience's mind, but it also makes it easier for me as a speaker. When I see that image pop up, I know what the message is, because I link those two things together as I build out my story.
You're making your own slides?
Yeah.
How do you find time to do that? Or how much time does it take you on average when you're preparing for a client?
Definitely hours and hours. So I just make the time, and the time is most efficient when you work on things that you have a clear idea of what you're going to do. And the time in between doing the actual work of making advances in the completion of a slide deck, then I'm ruminating on things, and I'm sort of trying to think about what's next. And then when I have a very clear picture about the 2 or 3 things that I want to add next, then I do the work and sit down and do it. So when I'm driving, when I'm doing other things, walking the dog, whatever, I'm collecting snippets that I want to add. I'm collecting those points in the outline that I want to add. And then so when I sit down to work, that I can be as efficient as possible. And then you build up skills over time, and image searching and knowledge searching and things like that. And then also you build up work over time. So as I do more speeches, then I might remember, oh yeah, there's these 3 slides in this other deck that I think would be really good, because this topic does fit with the client's needs. So I'm going to pull over these 3 slides or this section. You can get more efficient over time.
So the dirty little secret in speaking and consulting is reusing a lot of slides. How do you, when you've customized it enough based on the topics and subtopics like you talked about, to tune it for a client, versus just kind of reusing a lot of what you have? Like, a lot, of course you want to reuse the frameworks, because that's what people know you for, right?
Yeah, I think the way that whether you have it right or not is whether the story flows and makes sense. And I don't generally pick like giant sections up and move them, and it's generally more a slide here and a slide there, unless there is a section within a story. So say for example, we're talking about the people side of innovation. Then one of the things that I created that resonates with a lot of people is the 9 roles of innovation. And in that case, I've built over time several slides, a slide for each of the 9 roles, some questions that you might ask in using the 9 roles in a workshop setting, things like that. And in that context, I might pick up that whole section and bring that section over, because I already have a story within that I can plug into the broader story. And but generally, it's more likely to to be a slide with a framework on it. And then you build a slide or two to introduce that framework that is consistent with the story that you're trying to tell in that particular speaking engagement.
So you're picking components of your frameworks that you think are most apropos for that client.
Right.
And having exercises and examples that illustrate that.
Right.
Braden, one of the things that scares the heck out of me, and I think most people, but you seem to have mastered, is you work mostly with huge corporations and C-level executives, right? And the idea of walking into a boardroom where there are CEOs, there's a CEO of a publicly traded corporation, is intimidating. How do you overcome that? How do you have poise in there? And I've done it for a long time. Maybe not, I haven't done as many as you have done, but I'm scared to death. I'm thinking imposter syndrome. These guys, their time is so important. They're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Sure, I have my framework and I have something that I'm good at, that I've rehearsed, that I prepared for. But how do I not feel uncomfortable? Like, how do I feel comfortable, and how do I not feel like an imposter when I'm dealing with people that are really important?
Yes, I think that for me, one of the huge benefits that I have in my background that has helped me with that is that right out of high school, I served in the United States Navy as an enlisted person. I went off to basic training and then went out to sea, and I was on a ship. And one of the things that enlisted people do in the Navy is serve a tour or two or three as what they call a mess cook, which is basically providing help in the kitchen. And because I was a squared away sailor, I had the opportunity to work in as a mess cook in the officers' mess. So that meant that I had a lot of exposure to people that are those C-level executives of the ship, the captain and all of the officers of the ship. So you start to learn how to interact with people that previously felt somehow superior to you, and you start to see that they're people just like you, and you start to understand the things that are important to them and how to create your interactions well with them. And then that fear starts to go down a little bit. And then when I moved to Seattle, I also had the opportunity to work with the co-CEOs of Wonderman that were focused on the Microsoft account. So I was working with very senior marketing leaders. First thing we were working on is executing a change program to improve the relationship between the agency and Microsoft. So I had a lot of day-to-day interactions with these very senior marketing executives that, again, that having that sort of day-to-day experience starts to help you realize that we're all people. Everybody's trying to achieve certain goals. The better you can understand the goals that an individual is trying to achieve, at the end, that's what everybody's trying to do. Everybody's trying to achieve certain goals. We're all humans, and we all have these things in common. But within an organization, we do occupy different levels, and what changes at the different levels is the level of abstraction, the level of strategic versus tactical changes. As you learn what the different levels are and what abstraction and what level of strategic work they're focused on or what level of tactical work they're focused on changes, that allows you to better communicate with those individuals, because you're better able to understand what language they want to hear and what they're used to. And the better that you understand what they're looking for, the better you're able to deliver something of value to them.
Because you speak a common language that they need. And I imagine you see a lot of the same situations, which gives you a lot of cred, because people can see, like, you did this for Wonderman and for Microsoft. You could probably do it for T-Mobile and their agency, right?
Right.
What's been your coolest client?
Wow. There's different things that can make a client cool. So I had one client that was a mobile telecommunications provider that was focused on Africa, and they were moving their area headquarters to Dubai. So I had the opportunity to go to Dubai, which I'd never been to Dubai. And that was as they were building the Burj Dubai, the world's tallest building. I got to see that as it was nearing completion, and spend time working with them to help them to do knowledge transfer around creating innovation capability, help figure out what their vision, strategy, and goals were going to be around innovation, what some of their initial projects were going to be. So that was a really cool client, not only because what we were doing, and ultimately help them put together a pitch to get dedicated funding for innovation projects, and what we were able to achieve, but also the location made it special as well.
What are the factors you're looking for to make it a cool client? So you mentioned going to Dubai, or it could be a huge company. It could be the opportunity. It could be how much money you're being paid. What factors are you looking at?
For me, a cool client is working with great people on an interesting goal that they have and helping them achieve that goal. So working on a cool project with cool people, that makes it a cool client.
You're an innovation geek. That's awesome.
Better a geek than a nerd, right?
Yeah. How do you decide how much to charge?
That's always a challenge. I think part of it is deciding what you feel people are going to be likely to be willing to pay, and then their ability to pay sometimes comes into to a factor. And so it's kind of a push and a pull. You're trying to find out what the budget might be, and what you might be, where you can flex and where you can't flex, what you might be giving up by booking a particular client. And because once you book a date on your calendar, you can't give that to someone else. You have to make trade-offs sometimes. You have to turn down interesting opportunities because it just doesn't make financial sense. Like recently I had an offer to go speak in Turkey at a university event. So I would love to do it. I'd love to help them out. Giving up a whole week on my calendar for what was on offer, I just couldn't make it. The calculations didn't work for me. So that was really unfortunate.
A lot of us that are starting out, we speak for free because we're trying to build up a name, or we don't feel like we can charge yet. How do you decide which conferences you speak for free, or if you speak for free versus charging?
Well, I look at it as a value exchange. Sometimes the value exchange is money. There's a value exchange of other things that have a value. When you're at a place where you can charge, then another kind of value exchange may be the who's going to be in the audience, or perhaps you have an open date and maybe you're going through a lull, and maybe you just feel like you want to get out there and do something and make sure that you keep things fresh and build a bridge to the next thing. So it's all a question of, does this seem like I'm getting enough value in return based on what I'm giving up? Because you're always going to be giving up time. You're always going to be giving up the wear and tear of doing travel to go to the event. And you're always going to be giving up potentially time away from your family. So you just want to make sure that the value exchange works.
I know in my area, the two biggest conferences are Traffic and Conversion Summit by Digital Marketer, Media Marketing World by Social Media Examiner. And I've spoken for free every year for years at these conferences because nobody gets paid. I think even Gary Vaynerchuk came to both of those events. And I know for a fact, because I talked to the conference organizers, that he didn't get paid. But they did buy whatever, like 2,000 copies of his book for each of these. And from those industry conferences are how I was able to drive consulting clients. And I remember some of them, I could charge $30,000 for one day. Some of them, $1,500 for a day was they were balking at, but I eventually did. I won't tell you the name of the second one, but it's a major energy drink company that everybody knows about. And I took it because they're doing all kinds of cool events all over the world. They're probably the top energy drink company, the coolest one out there. So I couldn't imagine saying no to them, but I took them on, and they were probably the most difficult client I've ever had because of the things that they requested. How do you deal with clients like that? Or how do you spot clients that could be needy source of clients? It could be eventually nightmare clients.
I think by the questions that you ask early on and listening very carefully to the kinds of responses that you get back, either by email or by phone. So if you ask what you think is a very simple and straightforward question that nobody should have a problem answering, and they come back with, oh, we've got to do these 3 things and talk to legal and whatever, and you're not really asking that much, then you're like, okay, this client may cause me to spin a lot. Or if they can't commit to dates and times to get on the phone and talk to you, and if they won't make it a priority to have a conversation to try to tease out what will bring them the most value. If you start to see early on that it doesn't really seem like this is a priority to them, that they're just going through the motions or something, or the person that you're dealing with doesn't have the authority and to make the key things happen, those kinds of things can start to give you a sense like, I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to convert this and make this work and make this happen.
So when that happens, when do you decide when you just charge them more? Like I remember with Microsoft, there was a project that should have been 5,000, but we ended up charging 25, 30,000 because they just had so many meetings and it was crazy and all the legal stuff. So when do you just charge more? Because it often really big companies have lots of red tape versus saying, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, I think that's an individual decision. And if the earlier you can get a sense of what things are going to look like, the better. And oftentimes you if you have a discovery call before you've put forward a formal proposal, then it's in those discovery conversations that you can tease out whether or not you need to add in buffers and other things, or whether you want to charge a higher price, or whether you want to test to see if they'd be willing to pay a higher price before you put forward your proposal. So sometimes not putting forward the pricing immediately can help give you the opportunity to have some of those conversations and tease those things out.
I was talking with David Meerman Scott a couple days ago on my podcast, which is really cool. And Shep, I had him the same day. We're all in the same mastermind together. That's how I know Braden. And David was telling me that when COVID hit, all of us, we lost a whole bunch of speaking gigs, obviously, right? We moved to Zooms and virtual events. And I did a bunch of Zooms for a lot less because I figured it's virtual events, basically a webinar versus actually going over there and taking more time and all that. And David surprised me because he said he can charge as much for a virtual presentation as what he was charging before. And he's already, I think he's probably the most expensive person in our group. He charges a lot of money, like 6 figures to speak. What have you found, and what do you think about your pricing for virtual events versus in person?
I think it all depends on the situation. So I think that if an organization is looking at a virtual event and they're potentially having a larger audience, or they're feeling like they can have more people, then the pricing may look very similar. If the organization is looking at the potential cost savings that they might have from having a virtual event versus a live event, then they might feel like they have the money in their budget to still maintain a similar price. I kind of look at it as, how much work am I going to have to do? How much time am I going to have to spend? And look at that value exchange equation again, and then kind of find whether or not I want to do any kind of change for a virtual versus a physical event. Or is there may also, with a virtual event, be the opportunity to bundle in other things like content creation or other events, things of that nature. So there's almost sometimes more opportunities to do things with a virtual event. Maybe rather than discounting the price, maybe you're providing an additional thing of value. Maybe it's an article for their blog. Maybe it's a podcast interview for their podcast. Maybe it's something else. But if that audience is bigger than it might have been in the physical event, then that's also a factor to consider as well.
Really smart that you could put in consulting or bundle in other items instead of just lowering the price. That's awesome. So you don't have to answer this question, but I thought I'd ask because I'm curious. I'm sure people are always wondering because very few people I'll answer this question. Very few people will answer this question. But what's the most you've ever made on a speaking engagement? You don't have to say the name of the client, but just for people like me who are curious, how do you think about this? Because you see this idea that there's some folks like David and Shep that make millions of dollars per year because they can command a fee because they're well known in certain spaces. And there's other folks where they're making just a couple $1,000s per event, or it's mostly consulting as the bulk of it, as opposed to the actual speaking, like a $50K keynote fee.
Yeah, I'm not to 50K. I'm below 50K. Maybe
I always
someday.
wonder about that. These guys, like, how do they do that? How do they pull off? There was one guy we were talking about in our mastermind, and they said that he does 150 speaking events, if I remember correctly, per year. And each of them, he's averaging over 50. Thinking, how does one guy do that? Is he making that up, or how is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, my
on the road the whole time
is that you build up over time how much you can charge based on continuously delivering value. Well, the longer you deliver value for people and the higher amount of value that people feel that they get from the speech, then the higher you're able to go. So if you were at 10 and you're getting lots of recommendations at 10, and then you go to 20 and you're still getting lots of recommendations, well, now people are more willing to pay 20 than they were previously. You're getting 10. And then, so I think you work your way up as you just feel that you have the demand to test a new price. And it depends on the clients too.
It's true. Certain companies, 20K is nothing. And other companies, you got to go through weeks and weeks of red tape. One of the things that just puzzled me, and I'm curious what you think about is the impact of your personal brand on how much you can charge as a speaker. And I've been able to charge a lot more today than 20 years ago, where I'm literally teaching the same thing. The same methodologies and frameworks that I created 20 years ago, I'm teaching, but because I have a client base, because I'm well known in our industry associations, I can charge a lot more. I don't really think I'm delivering $20,000 of value to be there for 50 minutes. Like, I feel like there's nothing I could say in 50 minutes that's worth $20,000. But then I think the conference organizer wants me there because to have my name, it gives a certain level of credence, or draws more people in to buy tickets, or it shows that they are an industry leader in their area because they brought in one of the top guys in digital marketing. But how do you look at the value, Braden? It's kind of a squishier question. How do you look at the value of your personal brand in terms of the value that you provide by being there, as opposed to the value of the frameworks and the ROI they might achieve by implementing your frameworks?
Yeah, I think the two things are linked. And one example that I would point to as an example of how you can work your way up the value chain in much the same way that speakers are hoping that over time they're able to earn a higher speaker fee, is if you look at Nike, and then there was Under Armour. Now Under Armour has come up to the level of Nike. Then Champion is surged from what used to be like a discount $10 sweatpant kind of offer to now they're also able to charge $30, $40, $50 for a pair of sweatpants. So that personal brand, here we're talking about corporate brands, but the personal brand is important. And as your personal brand grows, usually as a speaker, from the quality of your thought leadership and the quality of how you can help organizations be more successful, then your personal brand grows. But your personal brand is oftentimes more about how you communicate through digital channels, and then your speaker value or your speaker brand is from the execution of your speeches. They're slightly separate, but they're linked, and it's worth making an investment in continuing to become a better speaker, but then also to make sure that you're making yourself visible and adding value to the topic community in digital channels as well.
So Braden, how has having 2 New York Times best-selling books contributed to your personal brand?
Well, just best-selling books,
or best-selling books. Yeah.
So
we'll edit that part.
Yeah.
How do you think about the value of the books as it creates authority for your brand? Like, how does that fit in for you? How do you assess your brand value?
Yeah. So the way that somebody once mentioned to me the value of a book, or how they thought about a book, was they thought of it as a large business card. The amount of work that goes into a book, developing the point of view, doing the work to get the book, actually getting a book deal with a publisher is not an easy thing as well. So in much the same way that somebody that graduates from Harvard with an MBA, or London Business School with an MBA, or some other top school, people view that person as, well, they've done all these things, so they must have some value. The fact that you've put all the work into getting a book deal and completing a book and putting great thoughts into that book, then people see that you've done all these things, so that has value. So the fact that you have a published book is seen as a key reference point in terms of this person knows what they're talking about in this topic area. So it gives you the ability in some cases to get up on that stage. And then also for the speaking bureaus, then also look for people that have a new book coming out. If your book came out a year or two ago and you approach speaker bureaus, then they're not even going to want to talk to you. So that was something that I found out probably a little too late, because I think I started approaching the speaker bureaus after the book had already come out. And so if I had that to do over again, I would have been approaching the speaker bureaus as I was writing the book, rather than after the book had been out for a little while.
The strategic timing of a book. Second to last question for you, Braden. How do you think about when it should be put out there for free, basically like a book, versus when it's like IP that you keep and charge a lot for? You know what I mean?
Yes. That's a good question. And that's something that I've tried to focus on figuring out with the second book, Charting Change. Is in the book, I introduced a lot of the methodology around human-centered change. And I introduced some of the tools I created the toolkit first. So I created a toolkit of more than 50 tools in the change planning toolkit. Now it's like 70 tools. So I created that first, and then it felt like it needed a book to explain it. And into the book, I put a lot of the methodology. I also put some of the tools in there, including one of the central assets, the change planning canvas. People that get the book, they can read all these things about how the methodology works and start to implement some of those mindsets or those approaches into how they approach organizational change and digital transformation. And then if they want to get more serious and have some tools to use, then any tool that was shown in the book, they can contact me, let me know that they purchased the book. Then 26 of the now 70 tools, then I'll send them those 26 tools.
How to get the rest of it. But a lot of companies, they just want to hire the guy, right? You're the guy, so of course we're going to hire Braden.
Yeah. So I created a tiered approach with the second book, where there's 10 free tools up on the website all the time. There's 26 of the 50 plus tools introduced in the book, and people that buy the book can get those 26 tools, which are 11 by 17 versions of the frameworks of the tools. And then people that buy the full toolkit, then they get access to poster size versions in some cases, and all the other tools. And in that other set of tools is a lot of worksheets and a lot of things where you can actually do things and put things into practice in terms of helping you with your change planning activities.
As in, charge a lot more for the implementation if they want the rest of the tools.
So then the tools are $99 a year, and you get access to all the tools. And that's $99 a year per person. Or if you want your entire organization to have access, then it's like $2 a person plus a small setup fee. So one of the key things being from the innovation space is continuously experimenting and prototyping things, testing things. There's always a new test to be run, just like in marketing.
Last question, Braden. You've worked with a lot of executives for many years. What's a question that you wish that you were asked?
Wow.
People ask you a lot of the same questions about innovation. What about human capital? How do we navigate this? All the stuff related to change management. And I imagine you've answered these questions zillions and zillions of times, right? So why would I ask you a question you've been asked before? But the coolest thing with an expert is asking them, what do they wish they were asked?
Yeah. I think that's a really hard question. And I think I think when you talk about leaders, the unfortunate truth is that most leaders, just like most spouses and going through divorce court or before pre-divorce with a counselor, want to know what they can get others to do. How can I make my organization more innovative? How can I make my organization more resilient and capable of continuous change? So I guess the question would be, how can I, as the leader, make myself more resilient and more capable of shepherding continuous change? How could I myself as a leader make changes about how I interact with others in order to foster innovation and to create a culture of continuous innovation? So leaders are always thinking about their organization. I guess the question might be, what about themselves could be changed?
And the answer is hire Braden Kelley.
And Dennis, you?
Well, for digital marketing. I don't know anything about change management. I'm just an engineer. Well, thank you so much, Braden. It's an honor spending time with you. And thank you for being on the Coach You podcast.